Hello. So we're going to talk about the introduction of Ben Crump's open season, the legalized genocide of colored people. So basically, he talks about some of his experiences as far as being a youngster and being able to go into an integrated school environment because of the efforts of his hero Thurgood Marshall and the Brown versus Board of Education case, which we've reviewed in this class, Brown 1 and Brown 2. And so he talks about the experience of having a classmate, a Caucasian female, being able to whip out $100 and having money and resources because her family has money, whereas that's not the case for the other black students or students of color. And how he's seeing early on some of the inequities in the system and how it motivates him to become a lawyer. So we see that in the introduction. So I'm also going to go over some of the quotes that he has where he's basically laying out what the purpose is of the book. So he says, I will show what I've learned as a civil rights attorney, that the justice system has been designed to protect white wealthy men and the rest of us are on our own. And see, that's basically right now we are seeing that play out clearly with this coronavirus. If you're wealthy and you've got resources, you're able to get things done. I mean, doesn't mean you're immune to getting the coronavirus, but you just have access to resources that the rest of us don't have. And so that just kind of we just read in Ta-Nehisi Coates the case for reparations, and we were talking about a kleptocracy, and so this is just really showing it's all that is bearing out. And uh, it's just black and white. He said, this book, featuring many of the cases I've worked on, revealed the systematic legalization of discrimination in the United States, and particularly how it can lead to the genocide, the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a people. That was on page 4 of the book. So then he talks about page 5, the act of genocide occurs when the laws of the country and their enforcement and adjudication are used to cut into the heart and soul of colored people. So we've been talking about that in this course. We've talked about since the time that black folks were brought here in 1619, all the way up into the present. There's the system has not always been for us. Yes, there's been some cases that have gone our way, but it always tends to it matters who's on the court, who the judges are, what's their background, were they a slave owner, were they sympathetic to black people or not. All of those things factor into it. And so he talks about, in other words, there are many ways to kill a race of people. You can take away their hope for a better life. You can deny them access to quality food and health care. That's really bearing out right now, as you're seeing across the nation. As far as food, you're seeing kids that normally would be able, because the schools have been shut down, and they're able to get 2 good meals at schools, but now because they're not there, they're struggling. And there are schools that are still trying to give them food and resources, but supplies are running out. And then healthcare, you're definitely seeing that issue with healthcare. You're seeing what they're saying now is certain situations, if they come to people's houses and they're not breathing, they're not going to they're not going to take them to the hospital because our system is being taxed. And it says you can flood their community with drugs. That totally makes me think of Congresswoman Maxine Waters, where where they were talking about how the CIA put drugs intentionally into our community. And I mean, we are a strong people. It has heavily affected us. But there's still people, like when I talk about a strong people, I'm talking about, I've seen kids that were born with drugs in their system, that were able to survive and overcome and be able to thrive. And you're seeing some of it, how, what do they talk about in scripture, things that are done for our harm turn to our good. Like people, we've been able to survive it, and then it's even spilled over into the majority of population, and they've been affected by it. And so that's definitely, you can see where there's been an impact on the black community with drugs, but it's also affecting the greater white community. They've been heavily affected by that. It says you can take safe, decent housing. So we definitely looked at that issue about the housing when we looked at Ta-Nehisi Coates, the case for reparations, and he was talking about the experience of Clyde Ross, like, who came from the South, came up to Chicago and had to deal with redlining and restrictive covenants. And That's an issue that people are dealing with now, like majorly. I've received calls from people that are struggling and dealing with housing issues, even though there are laws that have been put in place to prevent evictions and things of that nature, that people are still having struggles. It says you can lock them up for crimes they did not commit. So we've talked about this. I mean, and I've referenced in our materials, I know I referenced Just Mercy, which is a movie. There's a book and there's a movie by Brian Stevenson. And if you get a chance, I suggest you watch that movie, Just Mercy. You can watch it on Amazon now, and it just basically lays out Brian Stevenson's, like, what he was motivated to become a lawyer, and he represents people on death row. He also has represented juveniles, and but it basically shows his experience representing a brother who's on death row, and what the system is like, how biased and prejudiced the system is against poor people, people with disabilities, and Black people. And so it says you can lock them up for crimes they did not commit. In short, you can kill their spirit so they become the walking dead. So that was page 5 of the book. He's also talking in his book about police officers are not held accountable for murdering a Black person, and history shows they rarely are. And so it's just like he gets into this. I mean, when you talk about the history, we've had a history since we were first brought here as slaves up into the present. Police officers and KKK people lynching Black folks and getting away with it. What comes to mind is the Emmett Till situation. It says the police are killing us on the streets, but we're also being killed by judges and prosecutors in the courtrooms. And so that resonates with me strongly because, obviously there are some good prosecutors and good judges, but there are also prosecutors and judges that have bias, have some major bias and prejudice, and they don't. I don't know if it's because they come from a place of privilege and maybe they've never known anybody that committed a crime, or maybe they're just coming from neighborhoods where they're not profiled, so they get away with stuff. So there's a sense of entitlement. But you just see that this whole system is based on a prison industrial complex, and it's like I've said in other videos, I'm not saying that if people commit wrong that they shouldn't have consequences, but we just have laws that were put into place to oppress Black people at a higher rate. I talk to some of my white clients and I tell them, some of these laws that are affecting you're getting the spillover effect. Some stuff, Martin Luther King said, what affects one of us directly affects all of us indirectly. I'll talk to my white clients and be like, you caught up in some stuff that was meant to go after Black folks, but you're catching hell too. We're all affected by this. And so he says forces in this country support the extinction of a race by what seemed to be by any means necessary. That's page 13. He says, according to a report by the University of Michigan's National Registry of Exonerations, African Americans are disproportionately more likely to be convicted of crimes they did not commit. I'll say this. I've been a criminal defense attorney for 18 years, and that's why I do my videos on what to do and stop by the police, because the countless times I've talked to clients and they get caught up in a situation, they give a statement, and usually I come to them, they've already given a statement, there's a police report, and they say to me, that's not what I said, that's not what happened. And I'm like, okay, I'm called in, it's more of a lot of times it's damage control. What can we prove? Are there witnesses? What kind of jury are we going to get? Are we going to get a fair prosecutor? Are we going to get a fair judge? All of those factors come into play. I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day, because remember, I took a class on constitutionalism in South Africa, and I was talking about how in South Africa, they actually, in 1969, they abolished the jury trial system because they were getting predominantly white juries that were racist, and they just felt like Black people couldn't get a fair jury in South Africa. And it says, genocide amply describes what transpires between the U.S. judicial system and this country's colored people. It says, I will argue throughout this book that, in effect, the judicial system in this country targets, whether consciously or not, Black and brown people, robbing them on every level, including in the end of their very lives. The physical, financial, mental, and even spiritual deaths can be evidenced in newspaper articles, numerous studies, and courtrooms, and on the streets are impoverished neighborhoods. I mean, anybody that if you go into the inner city and it's, obviously I live in the Metro Detroit area, so I directly have seen it in Detroit. But you see it if you go to Flint, if you go to, any going all over Michigan. There's inner cities here in Michigan. You're going all over the nation. If you go to New York, there's just certain places you go. And for me, again, I've had the international experience. I've lived in South Africa, so I've been to shanty towns, and I've been to Senegal. I've been in France, so I've been to different parts of India. I've been to India. Now, India was serious; it was no joke. So I've been to parts of all over the world where I've seen people that live in an impoverished environment in neighborhoods, and I've seen the disparities. He says, you can see them in our prison populations, our schools, and our communities in need of health care. It's legalized genocide because the system legitimizes over and over again the injustices. Technical reasons are always found for their legality. Technical reasons. I mean, again, in the criminal justice system, I mean, it used to be a lot of times clients would tell me about experiences that they had, like how they were mistreated by the police, but a lot of times if it's just them and their police, the jurors would just believe them unless they had some physical evidence or videos. They were hit. A lot of times it was a struggle. So absent the privilege of legal protections and designated as a threat to society, people of color are prime targets for genocide. To comprehend the presence of genocide, we must acknowledge that our society is one that is built on violence and condones arming its people. Again, you look at the news reports recently, as soon as this corona stuff started happening, people started going and rushing to the stores and just freaking out, scared, and about what might happen, that there's going to be a pandemonium. It says this genocide is fueled by police brutality, unfair treatment in the judicial system, and stand your ground and shoot first laws, which are influenced by the gun lobby. I show how those laws have contributed to and have too often justified the killing of people of color by private, mostly white male citizens or the police. Over and over, police and their proxies overreact from a deep-seated premise based on implicit and explicit bias that blacks are dangerous, and the court system reinforces this notion by giving the police a pass. And when you look at that, and you even look at some of the training that the police have, and the images, like it's an image of a black person that they have to shoot at, and then it's like it's not a situation like you see in some countries where the police are trained to de-escalate situations. And I know that there are some places in the U.S. where they're working on that. I know Sheriff Clayton out of Washtenaw County has been doing that. But there are some places that are not doing that. There are some places where they're just taught to shoot to kill, and they don't try to de-escalate the situation. And you got some people, some scared police officers that are scared of black people that shoot first and ask questions later. And that's why I've said, because when I do the programs on what to do and stop by the police, a lot of times kids say to me, they're like, Ms. McCoy, we understand, we appreciate you coming in to talk to us about what to do and stop by the police. The Black Panthers used to call it to how to survive police encounter. But what are you doing? Are you talking to the police? And I have talked to the police, and I've done some radio interviews, and I have talked to the police. And I know I say the police need to talk to the police too, because what I'm saying is they need to weed out the people that are scared. I know Ben gets into it in his book too, talking about, and there's been discussions of this as well, about that the police has been, in some cases, has been infiltrated by white supremacists. So, I talk to my friends that are police officers, and I'm like, y'all got to weed those folks out, because it's a lose-lose situation for everybody. When the police are out there in the community and they're mistreating people in the community, and the community sees it, they're putting everybody at risk. And the people that they're mostly putting at risk are other police officers. So it's just a lose-lose situation for everybody. He talks about his vision on page 17. He says, but I believe in America. I believe our nation can be redeemed and can live up to its promise. I fight to help transform communities, marching and chanting, no justice, no peace, into one's proclaiming no justice, no peace. And it's spelled K-N-O-W. So no justice and no K-N-O peace. as opposed to no justice. If we don't get justice, there's no going to be no peace in the streets. He's saying, he's turning it around and saying, we've got to know what justice is, and so we can know what peace is. And I've always talked about knowledge is power, and so that's the introduction. So stay tuned. We are going to get into some further discussions. I also I've listed out here some people that he references. I know he gets into more details in the books. The victims: Philando Castile, Victor White, Howard Morgan, Kevin Battle, Elijah Thomas, Terrence Crutcher, Trayvon Martin. I've already put together some of the videos as dealing with Philando Castile. That's the brother that was in his car with his fiance, and there was a young child in the car, and the officer came up, and Philando Castile didn't do anything other than he told him he had a gun, and the officer freaked out again. That's what I was just talking about, these scary police officers. Don't become a police officer if you're scary. If you can't handle calm situations, don't do it. I mean, that's why I know there's some people. In one of the books I have, there's an activist. He was an activist, and he became a police officer, and he did a lot of mentoring for black children, black boys in the community. I mean, I know some of y'all don't want to hear it, but there are some of y'all that are meant to go out there and become police officers because you're used to being in a black community and you're comfortable with black folks, and you're not going to just jump because you see a black person. You're not scared. You're not going to just be scared of black people. You're going to try to de-escalate a situation before just kind of pulling out a gun, like the video games where they have video games where they're going out and or the movies where they just go out and shoot everybody and kill everybody without even thinking about it. Okay, so that's the introduction. So stay tuned for the next video.